The man stood in his office, high above the city. The view was all glass and steel, a world of quiet hums and soft carpets. It was successful, this life. But lately, it felt empty. It was like listening to a song through a thick wall. You could hear the beat, but you couldn't feel it. His latest project was a small diner called Maggie's, a place he bought 6 months ago. He saw it as a good investment in a busy, friendly neighborhood. The numbers came to his desk every week in neat columns. They were fine, just okay. But the money it should be making, the energy it should have, was missing. He hired a manager to run the place, a man who promised to handle everything. The reports said things like steady traffic and standard costs. But something in his gut, a quiet voice, told him the story was wrong. He realized he knew nothing real about Maggie's. He knew the price of eggs on a spreadsheet, but not how they tasted when scrambled on its grill. He knew the salary of the cook, but not if the cook smiled while working. He was a ghost in his own business. The thought made him restless. So he made a choice. A simple, plain choice. He would go there, not as the owner, but as a customer. He needed to see it, to taste it, to hear it without anyone performing for the boss. He needed the truth, even if it was an ugly one. He changed his clothes in the private bathroom of his office. He put away the expensive watch and the tailored jacket. He pulled on a pair of old, comfortable jeans, a simple gray t-shirt, and a blue baseball cap that had seen better days. He looked at himself in the mirror. The person looking back was younger, simpler. He wasn't a businessman here. He was just a guy. He shoved his wallet and phone into his pockets and took the elevator all the way down to the street. The air outside was different. It was loud and full of life. The sound of traffic, people talking on phones, the smell of exhaust, and food from a passing cart. His office building felt like a distant dream. He started walking the 10 blocks to Elmhurst, the neighborhood where Maggie's was. He passed shops with bright signs, people walking dogs, kids laughing. This was the real world, the one his diner was supposed to be a part of. He saw the diner from half a block away. The sign, Maggie's, was spelled out in red, slightly faded letters. The big window in the front had a neon sign of a coffee cup. It looked cozy. It looked like the kind of place he would have loved to go to as a kid. His heart beat a little faster. This was his place, and he was walking into it blind. The little bell above the door jingled when he pushed it open. The smell hit him first, a warm, heavy mix of frying onions, strong coffee, and something sweet, maybe pie. It was a good smell, an honest smell. He paused for a second, just inside the door, and looked around. It wasn't fancy. Red vinyl booths lined the walls, some of them cracked with age. The floor was a black and white checkerboard pattern. There was a long counter with round stools fixed to the floor, their silver bases worn shiny from use. A few customers were scattered around. An older man reading a newspaper at the counter, a couple talking quietly in a booth. Behind the counter were 2 cashiers. One was a young woman with her hair tied back, looking at her phone. Next to her was a young man, leaning on the counter and staring out the window. They wore simple, matching shirts. They didn't look mean, just bored. There was no sign of the manager he had hired. The man felt a strange shyness. This was his, but he had to pretend it wasn't. He walked over to the counter and slid onto one of the empty stools. The young woman, her name tag read Chloe, looked up from her phone. Her eyes flicked over him, taking in his simple clothes, his cap. She gave him a small, quick smile that was more like a reflex than a greeting. "What can I get for you?" she asked. Her voice was polite but flat. He looked up at the big board behind her. The prices made his eyebrows go up a little. They were higher, quite a bit higher, than what he had agreed to with the manager. A basic cheeseburger was nearly $13. He felt a first, tiny spark of anger, but he pushed it down. He was here to observe. "I'll have the Reuben sandwich, please. And a black coffee," he said, keeping his voice soft and even. "Sure," Chloe said. She tapped the order into the old register. "That'll be $18.50. He handed over a $20 bill. She gave him his change and a small plastic number, a 7, and went back to her phone without another word. He took the number and moved away from the counter, choosing a small booth in the corner by the window. It gave him a good view of the whole diner, of the cashiers, of the kitchen pass-through, where he could sometimes see a cook moving around. He sat there, just another customer waiting for his food. And for the first time, he began to truly see his investment, and he waited to hear its real story. He sat in the corner booth, the red vinyl seat creaking under him. The plastic number 7 felt cheap and light in his hand. He set it on the table right at the edge and looked around. The diner was quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, but empty. The only sounds were the low hum of a refrigerator and the distant clang of a pot from the kitchen. His coffee came first. A different person, a tired-looking older woman, brought it over in a thick white mug. She gave him a little nod, a real one, before walking back to the kitchen. He wrapped his hands around the mug. It was hot, almost too hot. He took a small sip. It was bitter and had been sitting on the burner for too long. Not terrible, but not good. It was just coffee, the kind you drink because you need it, not because you want it. He watched the two cashiers. The girl, Chloe, was back on her phone, her thumb scrolling slowly. The boy, Josh, was still leaning on the counter. They weren't talking to each other. They weren't cleaning anything. They were just there, waiting for the day to be over. He thought about the reports from the manager. "Staff exhibits good energy," one had said. He almost laughed a bitter little laugh into his coffee cup. Then the bell on the door jingled. A group of 3 construction workers came in, their boots heavy on the floor. They looked like they'd been working hard all morning. They went straight to the counter. The mood changed instantly. Chloe put her phone down, face up, on the counter. Josh stood up straight. Fake smiles appeared on their faces. It was like someone had flipped a switch. "Hey there! What can we get for you guys?" Chloe said, her voice suddenly bright and chirpy. The workers ordered big meals, double cheeseburgers, extra fries, milkshakes. The cashiers were all jokes and quick typing. "Coming right up," Josh said, his voice loud and friendly. They treated the workers like old friends, like the best customers of the day. The man in the booth watched, his stomach feeling tight. He wasn't angry. They were doing their jobs now. He was confused. Why the switch? Why were these customers different from him? He looked down at his own clothes. He looked at the workers' clothes. They were both dressed simply, in T-shirts and jeans. Was it just that they were a group, spending more money? It felt like it was something else, something he couldn't quite see yet. His food arrived. The older woman brought it on a beige plate. The Reuben sandwich was big. He'd give it that. The rye bread was grilled a dark brown, and it was piled high with meat and sauerkraut. A pickle spear and a handful of potato chips were on the side. It looked okay. It looked like every other diner Reuben in the world. He picked up one half. It was heavy. He took a bite. The bread was good, crispy and buttery. But then he tasted the rest. The corned beef was dry, like it had been cooked yesterday and warmed up today. The sauerkraut was soggy and had no tang, no crunch. The Swiss cheese was barely melted, a cold, rubbery layer in the middle. It wasn't awful. It was just sad. It was careless. No one in the kitchen cared if this sandwich was good. They were just putting parts together on a plate, He ate a few more bites, because he was hungry, but each one was a disappointment. He pushed the plate away slightly and went back to his bad coffee. The construction workers were laughing loudly at their table, eating their food with big, hungry bites. They seemed happy. Maybe their food was better. Maybe the cook knew them. He was just about to signal for the check, his experiment feeling like a failure, when the two cashiers started talking again. The workers were busy eating. The diner was quiet, and their voices drifted over to his corner, clear as day. Josh nodded his head, not looking at Chloe, just speaking to the air. See? That's what I was talking about. Chloe followed his gaze. She wasn't looking at the construction workers. She was looking directly at him, at the man sitting alone in the corner booth. Her eyes were flat and cool. She looked back at Josh and let out a long, slow sigh, like she was carrying the world's biggest problem. "Tell me about it," she said. "Ever since the new guy bought this place, it's like the whole feeling changed." The man in the booth froze. He stopped breathing. He made his face blank, like he was just staring out the window, but every part of him was listening. Josh shook his head. Right? Trying to make it all fancy. New menu prices. New rules. For what? Then Chloe leaned in a little closer, over the counter, and she lowered her voice. But the diner was so quiet, and he was listening so hard, that every word felt like it was being spoken right into his ear. "The manager told me," she said, her voice a mix of gossip and complaint. "He said the owner is some big-shot investor type. Probably never even eaten a Reuben in his life. Probably just sees this place as a number on a screen." She paused, and then she said the next part, and the words hung in the greasy air of the diner. "He said the guy is black, some rich, out-of-touch dude from downtown. Bet he's never even stepped foot in here. Just wants to take money out of the neighborhood." Josh snorted, a mean little sound. Figures. Probably doesn't know the first thing about a place like this. The man sat perfectly still. The half-eaten sandwich on the plate in front of him seemed to blur. The sounds of the diner, the clinking forks, the hum of the fridge faded into a dull roar in his ears. The taste of the dry meat and sour coffee filled his mouth. But all he could feel was a coldness, starting in his chest and spreading out to his fingers and toes. It wasn't the ignorant words that cut the deepest, though they were sharp and ugly. He'd heard whispers like that before in his life, in other rooms, from other people. You built a shell for that. It was the betrayal. The manager he hired, the man he trusted to run his business, was the one saying these things. This was the poison in the well. This was why the reports were flat. This was why the food was sad. The people running his diner hated the very idea of him. They were stealing from him, yes, with the high prices. But worse, they were stealing the soul of the place and blaming him for the theft. He sat there, a ghost in his own corner, listening to the two cashiers laugh quietly now, sharing their complaint. He was invisible to them, just part of the crowd they didn't want. He looked down at his own hands. Then, very slowly, he pushed the plate of the terrible, expensive sandwich even further away. The game was over. Now it was time for something else. For a long minute, the man just sat there. The cold feeling in his chest was so heavy it was hard to breathe. He looked at the half-eaten sandwich, at the greasy plate. He looked at the two cashiers, now laughing about something on the phone screen. They had forgotten about him already. To them, he was nothing. A passing thought. A stereotype in a booth. The anger came then. Not a hot, shouting anger, but a deep, quiet, and solid one. It was like a stone settling in his gut. This was his place. He paid for the lights over their heads. He paid for the flour in the kitchen, for the beef in the freezer. He paid their salaries. And they were sitting in the middle of it, mocking him, stealing from him, and ruining something that could be good. He thought about all the reports on his desk, the numbers that never added up, the manager's promises that things were under control. It was all a lie. The manager wasn't just bad at his job. He was a thief who used ugly words to turn his staff against an owner they'd never met. He made the owner a villain to cover his own stealing. The man took a slow, deep breath. The shock was wearing off, and his mind, the one that built a business from nothing, started to work. This wasn't just about hurt feelings. This was a broken system. The food was bad because no one cared. The service was cold because respect was gone. The prices were high because someone was pocketing the difference. He couldn't just stand up and yell. That wouldn't fix anything. It would just be a scene. He needed to be smart. He needed proof, not just for himself, but for what came next. He pulled out his phone, making it look like he was just checking a message. Carefully, he opened the voice recorder app. He set the phone down on the table, screen side down, near the edge where the vinyl met the wall. It was almost invisible. He needed them to talk more. He needed to hear the manager's name from their mouths. He took another sip of the terrible coffee, wiped his mouth with a paper napkin, and stood up. He walked back toward the counter, his steps slow. The two cashiers looked up. The fake, polite customer service mask slipped back onto their faces, but it was thin. He could see the boredom underneath. "Excuse me," he said, his voice still quiet, keeping it soft and unthreatening. "Yeah?" "The boy," Josh said. "This sandwich," the man said, gesturing back to his booth. "The corned beef is really dry." "Is it old?" Chloe shrugged, a little annoyed. "It's just how it comes. We just serve it." "But who makes the decision to serve food like that?" the man asked, pretending to be just a frustrated customer. "Isn't there a manager? I'd like to talk to someone in charge about the quality." He saw a look pass between them, a roll of the eyes. "Here's a complainer. Carl's in the back," Josh said, the name coming out easy. "But he's busy with orders. He's the manager. He handles all the buying and the menu." Carl, the name clicked into place. The manager he hired. The one sending the reports. "Well, maybe he should handle the quality too," the man said, letting a little frustration into his voice. It wasn't hard to fake. This is a diner. The food should be good. Chloe gave him that empty smile again. "I can get you a different side if you want." "More chips?" He shook his head. No, thank you." He turned and walked back to his booth. He could feel their eyes on his back, heard the low murmur start again as soon as he sat down. He picked up his phone, stopped the recording, and started a new one. He waited, his heart beating hard against the stone of anger in his chest. Their voices came back, lower this time, but the diner was so quiet. "Some people just want to complain about everything," Chloe muttered. "Probably wants a free meal," Josh whispered back. "Carl says we get people like that now. Says the new owner's ideas attract the wrong crowd. People who don't appreciate a classic diner." "He's probably right," Chloe said. "I mean, look at this place. It's dying. And that guy downtown probably doesn't even know why." They kept talking, their words painting a picture of a greedy, careless owner and a manager. Carl, who was their inside source, their fellow critic. The man listened, recording every poisonous word. He heard about the new cheap meat supplier Carl had found. He heard about how the neighborhood was changing. Each sentence was a piece of the puzzle, showing him exactly how his diner was being bled dry from the inside. He had heard enough. More than enough. The undercover part of his day was over. Now it was time to be the owner. He stood up again. This time his movement was different. There was no slouch. His shoulders went back. He walked not with the slow step of a tired customer, but with a direct, purposeful stride. He didn't go to the counter. He walked past it, toward a door next to the kitchen pass-through that said, "Private." "Hey," Josh called out, his voice confused. "You can't go back there. That's for staff." The man didn't stop. He didn't even turn his head. He pushed the door open. It led to a short, messy hallway with a small office on the left. The door was open. Inside, a man in a short-sleeved shirt was sitting at a desk, looking at a computer screen, a sandwich of his own in his hand. This was Carl. Carl looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "Can I help you?" "You're not supposed to be back here." The man from the booth stood in the doorway, filling it. He looked at Carl, the man he'd interviewed over a nice lunch months ago. The man who had shaken his hand and promised to treat the diner like his own. "Carl," the man said. His voice wasn't loud, but it wasn't the soft voice from the booth anymore. It was clear. It was firm. It was the voice of someone used to being in charge. "We need to talk. Right now. And you need to call your 2 cashiers into this office." Carl's face went from annoyed to confused, then to a flicker of something else worry. He didn't recognize the man in the cap and jeans. "Not yet. And who are you?" Carl asked, standing up, trying to sound tough. The man reached up slowly. He took off the blue baseball cap. He met Carl's eyes and didn't blink. "I'm the owner," he said. The words were simple, and they fell into the tiny, messy office like bricks. "And you're fired." The manager, Carl, just stared. His mouth was slightly open. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of a ringing phone from the front and the hum of the old computer on the desk. "What?" Carl finally said. The word came out as a cough. He looked the man up and down, from the simple jeans to the plain T-shirt. A confused smile twisted his face. "No, you're not. Look, buddy, I don't know who you are, but you need to leave before I call the cops." The man didn't move. He felt calm now, the cold anger focused into a sharp point. "My name is on the lease in the top drawer of that desk," he said, his voice still low, but leaving no room for argument. "The bank account you deposit the daily cash into? That's my company's account. The interview we had at the Green Leaf Cafe downtown? You ordered the salmon." Carl's face began to change. The fake smile melted away. His eyes, squinted in disbelief, suddenly widened. He did remember the salmon. He remembered the quiet, well-dressed man across the table who asked thoughtful questions. He looked at the face in front of him now. Without the suit, without the office lighting, it was the same face. The realization hit him like a punch to the stomach. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving a pale, waxy look. I didn't." "You're?" Carl stammered, his brain scrambling. "Call your cashiers into the office." "Now," the man repeated, each word slow and deliberate. Carl, moving like a robot, leaned out of the office door and shouted, his voice shaky. "Chloe, Josh, get in here. Now." The man stepped back into the hallway to make room. He saw the 2 cashiers appear at the end of the hall. They looked curious, annoyed at being called away from the front. They walked down the short hallway, their expressions changing when they saw the customer from the booth standing there with their boss. "What's going on?" Chloe asked, looking at Carl, not at the man. Carl couldn't speak. He just pointed a weak finger. The man turned to face them. He saw the moment they truly looked at him. Not as a random customer, but as the man who had just confronted their manager. They saw the new posture, the straight back, the direct look in his eyes. Their confusion turned to a faint, nervous worry. "I just fired your manager," the man said to them. The words were simple. A fact. Josh laughed, a short, nervous burst of sound. "Fired him? Who are you, man?" The man took a small step forward. "For the last 20 minutes, I've been the customer in booth 7. The one you said was part of the wrong crowd. The one you said was here because the new owner was ruining this place." He paused, letting the words sink in. Their faces began to freeze. "You were right about one thing. The new owner is here." Chloe's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes darted from the man's face to Carl's terrified, one, and back again. The puzzle pieces crashed together in her head. The quiet customer. The questions about the manager. The talk they'd had just out in the open. "Oh my God," she whispered behind her fingers. You're lying," Josh said, but his voice had no force. It was a weak, last-ditch hope. The man ignored him and looked directly at Carl, who was leaning against the desk for support. "You've been stealing from me. The prices on the board are 20% higher than what I approved. You've been blaming a failing business on a neighborhood changing, and on an owner you've described as an out-of-touch stereotype, just so you could pocket the difference and blame someone else. You poisoned your own staff against the very person who signs their checks." "It's not true," Carl blurted out. But it sounded like a child's denial. "I have it all," the man said. And for the first time, he took out his phone. He didn't play the recording, but he held it up. Every word from the front counter. Your name, their words. The story. It's all here. "The police and my lawyers will be very interested in the financial records, Carl. You can explain the price difference to them." The word police made Carl slump. All the fight left his body. He just stared at the stained office carpet dot the man, then turned to the two cashiers. They looked young now, not bored and mean, but scared and caught. "As for you two," he said. He wasn't shouting. He was just tired. "You are also fired. Effective right now. You will walk out the front door, and you will not come back. A security guard will be here in 10 minutes to change the locks and make sure you only take what belongs to you." Tears were now streaming down Chloe's face, but they were tears of shame and fear, not sadness. "We didn't know," Carl said. "It doesn't matter what he said," the man interrupted, not harshly, but firmly. "You saw a customer, and you decided who he was and what he meant based on gossip and prejudice. You judged a book by its cover while you were standing inside the library. This is a place of business, not a clubhouse for gossip. Now, please leave." He stepped aside, clearing the path to the hallway. For a moment, no one moved. The reality of the last 5 minutes was too heavy. Then Carl, his head hanging low, shuffled out of the office, past the man and down the hall. After a second, Chloe and Josh followed, not looking at anyone, their faces red. The man watched them go. He then walked back into the front of the diner. The few customers were staring, having seen the 3 employees walk out, 2 of them crying. The cook was peeking out from the kitchen pass-through, his eyes wide. The man walked to the center of the diner, near the old pie display. He took a deep breath, taking in the smell of the place, the grease, the coffee, the potential. He cleared his throat. "Everyone, may I have your attention for just one moment," he said. His voice carried across the quiet room. Every face turned to him, the construction workers, the old man at the counter, the cook in the window. "This diner is closing for the rest of the day," he said. A small groan came from one of the workers. "But," the man continued, holding up a hand, "it will reopen tomorrow. Under new management. My management. The person who actually owns it." He looked around at the tired red booths, the dirty floor, the menu board with the wrong prices. "The prices on that board will be rolled back starting tomorrow. The food will be better. I promise you that. And everyone who works here will respect the customers and each other. This is a diner for everyone in this neighborhood. That's how it should have always been. He saw the cook still looking at him, unsure. "Sir," the man said to him, "what's your name?" "Tony," the cook said, his voice hesitant. "Tony, will you please lock the front door after these customers leave? Then, if you're willing, I'd like you to stay. I want to talk to you about what this kitchen needs to make a great Reuben." A look of surprise, then a slow, tentative smile spread across Tony's face. He nodded. Yeah, I can do that." The man gave a single nod back. He then walked over to the front door, flipped the sign from open to closed, and turned to face what was left of his diner. The mess was his now. The cleanup was his to start. For the first time since he bought it, he finally felt like the real owner. The bell on the door gave one last, soft jingle as the final customer left. The old man with the newspaper had patted the owner's arm on his way out and said, "Good luck, son." Now the diner was empty and quiet. The sudden silence felt huge. The owner stood in the middle of it, alone with the mess and the smell of old grease. The anger was gone, and in its place was a deep tiredness, and a mountain of work. First, he called his assistant from his main office. His voice was quiet but clear. "I need a security person at Maggie's Diner in Elmhurst right now. I need the locks changed tonight. And cancel all of Carl's access keys, codes, everything." He listened for a moment. "No, everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. I'll explain later." He hung up and looked around. The truth was, he didn't know the first thing about running a diner. He knew numbers and deals. He didn't know how to work a grill or where the soap was kept. For a second, he felt a wave of doubt. What had he done? Then he heard a clatter from the kitchen. He walked to the pass-through window. Tony, the cook, was there, wrapping up the leftover food. He looked up nervous. "You didn't have to stay, Tony," the owner said. Tony shrugged, his big shoulders moving slowly. "You said you wanted to talk about the Reuben." He paused. "Besides, it's been a bad few months in here. Felt wrong. I'm glad you came." Those simple words, "I'm glad you came," lifted some of the weight from the owner's shoulders. He wasn't completely alone. He went around and pushed through the swinging kitchen door. It was a different world, hot, steamy, with stainless steel everywhere. It was messy, but he could see it was a working mess, not a dirty one. Tony kept his station clean. "Show me," the owner said. Tony looked confused. "Show you what?" "The Reuben. Show me what's wrong with it. Talk to me like I know nothing." Because I don't. For the next hour, Tony stopped being a nervous employee. He became a teacher. He showed the owner the sad, pre-cooked corned beef in the plastic bag, sitting in warm water. "See, this is the problem. Carl switched suppliers to save money. This stuff has no flavor. It's just wet string." He opened the big walk-in fridge and pointed to a tub of sauerkraut. "This should be crisp. It should have a zip. This is soggy. It's from a can he bought because it was cheap." He showed him the old, tired grill where the grease wasn't cleaned off properly. "You can't get a good sear on the bread with this gunk on here. It just soaks in and gets greasy." The owner listened. He asked questions. He wrote notes on his phone. He wasn't a boss right then. He was a student. He learned about the importance of good rye bread, about real Swiss cheese that melts right, about the balance of meat, kraut, and dressing. "The customers out there," Tony said, wiping his hands on his apron, "the ones who keep coming back, they're not coming for this." He pointed at the sad ingredients. "They're coming because this place was like home. They want it to be good again. They just gave up complaining." The security person arrived, a calm, professional woman. She started her work on the doors. The owner asked Tony if he knew anyone honest who needed work, who cared about food. Tony promised to make calls. Later, sitting at the counter with 2 glasses of water, the owner laid out his plan. We close for 3 days. Not just today. We need a reset. We deep clean this place from top to bottom. You and I will find new suppliers, good ones. We'll fix the menu with your help. We'll set fair prices. And we'll hire a couple of new people who want to be here. Tony nodded, a real hope in his eyes for the first time. What about a name? Maggie's feels tainted now. The owner thought about it. He looked around at the checkerboard floor, the old stools. It wasn't about fancy new names. It was about fixing what was broken. It stays Maggie's, he said finally. We don't run from the past. We fix it. We make the name mean something good again. The next morning, the owner was back before the sun was up, wearing old clothes. He didn't go to his fancy office. He went to the diner. He and Tony, and a friend of Tony's who used to be a cleaner, started the work. They pulled out every appliance. They scrubbed the grill until it shone silver. They mopped floors and washed windows. The owner got on his hands and knees to scrape gum from under the booths. His back ached and his hands were sore, but it felt real. It felt honest. He called a sign painter to fix the fading letters on the window. He found a local bakery for the rye bread and a deli for the real corned beef. He listened to Tony argue passionately for a better brand of pickles, and he agreed. On the 3rd day, a young woman named Leah answered the ad for a cashier. She was putting herself through college. When the owner interviewed her, he didn't ask fancy questions. He just said, "The most important rule here is that every person who walks through that door gets treated with the same respect. Can you do that?" She looked him right in the eye and said, "Of course. It's just common decency." The morning they reopened, a small sign was in the window. Under new management. Same old heart. Come try our new Reuben. The bell jingled. The first person in was the old man from the newspaper. He sat at the counter. The owner, wearing an apron, was helping behind the counter. He poured the coffee himself. It was fresh and hot. "Well?" the old man asked, a twinkle in his eye. "Is this place for everyone?" The owner smiled, a real tired, happy smile. He looked at Tony in the kitchen, giving him a thumbs up. He looked at Leah, who was greeting a young mother with a stroller at the door. "It is now," he said, and he meant it. He wasn't a ghost in his own business anymore. He was in the middle of it, and it finally felt like his.